Hello. Before we get into the actual events in China, it's necessary to say a few words about the underlying conflict. Since the early 90s, the world has been run by the elite of the Western Global Project, international bankers, or as Trump once called them, transnational financiers. And everything would have gone well for them. They had almost eliminated everyone and achieved what they wanted, but then something went wrong. It became clear that this model no longer works. And what we're seeing today is an attempt to, first, shrink this model and somehow, reconfigure it in order to, preserve it and, keep developing it further. In order to obtain resources, various tools were used. At the first stage, there was the green tax, which they wanted to collect from the whole world. At the second stage, it was artificial intelligence, since the green project didn't work out. Soon, artificial intelligence won't work out either. This will become clear soon with the collapse of financial bubbles. But the elite that was put together for the resource emission, consists not only of the elite from the Western Global Project, but also includes some parts, for example, from the Judaic Global Project centered in London, and a few other figures. They are desperately fighting to somehow survive, to hold on in any way they can. Let's note that different major countries, at different times, tried to get involved in this project. Let me remind you that in China, there was quite a powerful elite group. It still exists today and actively opposes Xi. They tried to implement the Chimerica project, that is, a U.S.-China alliance as the global hegemon. So, the European Union had the AUKUS project together with the United Kingdom, which is also falling apart today for a simple reason. London is actively fighting against those groups that have come to power. Not full control yet in the United States. India, too, was essentially playing the AUKUS project as an alternative to China. It should be noted that some of these projects contradicted each other, since AUKUS was obviously aimed against China. But none of this matters, because today it has become clear that, first of all, this project is not viable. However, not everyone has come to understand this yet. If we take a look, we'll see that Trump wants to seize the main resource of the Euro-Atlantic elites in the Federal Reserve. He is working very actively in this direction. As for the Euro-Atlantic elites, they want to crush Trump and somehow reform their structure, ideologically blaming some external forces for their failures. At the same time, all the alternative groups are actively trying to weaken them somehow. The first major players to realize that it was pointless to play along with these people were China and India. Now, if we go back to the events in China, first the SCO summit, then the parade celebrating the victory over Japan, we can see that they clearly demonstrated to us. Let me emphasize again, this was demonstrated. It's not like it just happened by accident. The trio Xi, Putin, Modi at the SCO, and the trio Xi, Putin, Kim Jong-un in Beijing. This is a very interesting point. Why? Because it's obvious that the trio of Xi, Putin, and Modi is an economic trio. Everyone understands that. Moreover, they started talking about global governance there, Xi said so. But everyone clearly understands that we're talking about economic management. Today, the first deputy or maybe just the deputy of Dmitry Kiselyov at RIA Novosti or at Russia Today, I can't quite remember their titles, Alexander Yakovenko. By the way, just so it's clear, Alexander Yakovenko was our ambassador to London for many years. So he knows exactly how everything works over there. And later, by the way, he was also the rector of the Diplomatic Academy. So Yakovenko said that a new world is being built, but not on the territory that belongs to the so-called Golden Billion. Let them handle it themselves on their own. On their own. Let's note that economically, this is impossible. In other words, it's a disaster. That's why the Golden Billion will have to start fighting. Trump doesn't want to do this for quite understandable reasons. Many others don't want to either. But for now, it seems like the European Union does want to. Well, London has a different goal. They're trying to carve out at least some peace for themselves so they can somehow separate and remain at least a minimal player. I'd like to point out that Poland was the first to figure it all out. They started distancing themselves from these guys, saying, no, 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 no. We're not fighting with Russia. We're not sending troops into Ukraine. Just leave us out of this. And the German leadership is clearly living in some kind of, how should I put it, they're off in the clouds. Because when Merz talks about training Banderites on Polish territory, even though Poland has very publicly distanced itself from the Banderite agenda. Do you understand that modern Ukraine cannot exist without fascist ideology? Well, they just call it Banderism, but that doesn't make any difference. It's a fascist ideology. How many Poles were exterminated under this ideology, both by the Germans and, accordingly, by the Banderites on Ukrainian territory? What? Do they not remember this? They've actually started talking about it more openly lately. And modern Ukraine can't give this up. So here's the conclusion. The Poles realize that, even in the medium term, literally 2 or 3 years, this state entity won't exist. What will happen? That's a separate question. How will it happen? Or something else? But it's simply impossible. In any case, their current policy assumes that it won't exist. Unlike the policy of the leadership of the Euro Union, and that's very important. Now let's see who else hasn't quite understood something. Take a very close look at the detailed reports that recently came out of China. There are basically 2 people missing who are important, one at the regional level, the president of Kazakhstan, Tokayev, and the other, even more so, is the head of Turkey, Erdogan. The question is, why aren't they there? And the answer is very simple, because both Erdogan and Tokayev were played. Well, we understand that it was the British who did it, but I think there were a lot of different players involved. And they built their strategy around the logic of this dying Euro-Atlanticism and decided to betray everyone. Well, Erdogan always betrays everyone, and, accordingly, it seems Tokayev decided to betray both Russia and China as part of some of his own games. So what? Life changes, the picture changes. And so, it's unclear what to do. Now, let's get back to the second trio. That's Xi, Putin, and Kim. It's absolutely clear that this trio isn't about economics, but about the military. And why is Kim important here? Even though, it would seem, it's such a small country, Karelia. Well, first of all, because it took part in the special operation, though only on Russian territory. But that's not the main thing. The main thing is that Kim is hardcore. He's, so to speak, a real Bolshevik, and he'll fight to the bitter end, to the very end. And for this reason, the West was told, guys, that's it, it's over, your trick didn't work. You may have tried to fool Putin, or more precisely, the peace party in Putin's inner circle. And up to a certain point, as long as he didn't have reliable allies, Putin allowed the peace party to play their game. But now, the situation has changed. Once again, the situation didn't change because Putin tricked Modi and Xi. You can't fool them. The reason is something else. It's because Putin, day after day, month after month, year after year, explained the logic behind how events were unfolding. I won't repeat it, because we've been laying it out for more than 20 years now. That logic, now it's come out into the open, so to speak. Before that, it had been revealed, and both Xi and Modi understood it. And that's why they won't abandon Russia, because you can't just walk away from an objectively developing process. And Kim is needed to explain to the Western hawks that, guys, if you go to war, you won't be dealing with us, quiet and peaceful, you'll be dealing with Kim. If you want my opinion, if I were in their place, I wouldn't risk it. That's the essence of the events that took place in China. By the way, Putin explained things very clearly to the peace party in the interview, well, at the press conference that he gave at the end of his visit to China. When he told the story about how Ukraine and the Euro-Atlantic elites backing it behaved in 2022. And he explained that now that's it, now it's all set. You yourselves wanted to go to war. Well, fine, we'll keep fighting until you agree to our legitimate demands. But, of course, taking into account the changes that you yourselves have made. We pulled back from Kiev, but now you move back beyond Kiev, over there, across the Dnipro, far, far away. And if you don't pull back, well, then you'll have only yourselves to blame. I don't know what they're going to do. That's a separate question. That's it. That's really all there is to it. I'd also like to point out Putin's entire press conference, all the speeches by Xi and Modi. It's not about confrontation with the West. It's about being constructive. We're going to settle in here. That's what we're going to do. But you do as you wish. They can't fight anymore. They just can't. Yeah, they'll fight among themselves over there. Trump defeats the Euro-Atlantic elites, and the Euro-Atlantic elites defeat Trump. All sorts of rumors about Trump possibly being killed or something else. I'm not even going to comment on that. Of course, it's possible. Just explain the plan to me. What plan? The problem is that this team doesn't have any long-term plan at all, only very, very short-term ones that change, every 3 days. You can see that, by the way. For this reason, I believe that we are now gradually approaching a situation where we must present ourselves, we, meaning those countries that are planning to build a normal economy and a normal world, different from this Bretton Woods dollar-based West. There are a lot of questions here. How should we solve the problems with dollar-based pricing, dollar markets, the dollar settlement system, and so on? And finally, so to speak, the mechanism for creating added value. Let's note that the first 3 questions are secondary to the first one. If you don't have a mechanism for creating added value, everything else is pointless. This is where economists are needed, but there are few economists. Most of them are in Russia. As far as I know, in China and India, there aren't any economists who really understand what's going on. Maybe there are some in the Western world, only in Japan, but they won't work for the Western world. And that's it. That's all. I think this will be the main part of the changes that will happen in the world in the near future. In other words, work will begin on developing this alternative economic strategy. At least that's how I see it. But no one's going to rush because they might still try, especially in Europe, to start a little war. So first, you have to win that little war. But the fact that the West has already been shown what we are capable of, that's absolutely clear now. I'll say it again, this is a fundamentally important point. It's pointless to try to play Xi and Modi off against each other. They came together within this framework because they understood the objective development of the situation. Well, actually, you could see it in the footage, what they're like. It's not even that they're happy. It's that they're relaxed. You can see it, right? It's like they now understand what they'll be doing in the coming years. That question, the hardest one for any country's leader, is no longer an issue. The fact that Trump didn't like it, that they didn't like it in London, that they didn't like it in Brussels, that's obvious. But here, guys, sorry, your time has passed. Thank you. Thank you for your attention.